Good afternoon, everybody. Today, in this pleasant talk on research, I would like to warmly welcome all the speakers, audience, and members of ABP. ABP is a non political organization that has been working for Bengal in various ways for the last 4 years. This organization is specially guiding the young students to higher education to implement the thinking of Dr. Asif Akram. ABP Research Guide Unit has been established in October 2021. Through this, ABP helps the students of Bengal to get research work and PhD in India and abroad. ABP has been helping students to compete in various state and central government examinations. ABP started the much needed spoken English course that is crucial for placement in corporates and multinational companies here and abroad. Our dream is to make this Sonar Bangla progressive, irrespective of caste, creed, and religion. Everyone can participate in this progressive thinking and get benefited. ABP is working on the essential issues such as sustenance, blood, health, various social services, women empowerment, and education. It arranges medical camps for health checkups and treatment. This organization provides financial help in times of emergency. Besides all this, ABP arranged a writing competition for essays and stories, and it also published few magazines. It provides books to school and college students. This organization has distributed blankets to the poor and needy this winter. Today's keynote speakers are respected Shvetal, Pare and Shihab Khan. On behalf of ABP, I cordially welcome them. They will be talking about doctoral and postdoctoral opportunities in Australia. We hope today's talking will show a new guiding path to the audience. All are welcome to this special program. Now, I would like to request the distinguished caller Dilruba Khatun to begin the program. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Janathan Firdos, for this beautiful introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of the Association of Bengali Professionals, also known as ABP, it's my pleasure to welcome all of you joining us for today's webinar. Today, the primary objective of our webinar is to provide you with the information and guidance to your academic pursuits in Australia. We have gathered a panel of expert speakers who will share their knowledge and insights on various aspects of doctoral and postdoctoral programs in Australia, including application procedures, research funding, visa application processes, post-application life in Australia, and so on. And for this discussion, we are privileged and honored of having two distinguished speakers with us. We have Dr. Shvetal Vyas Pare, a casual lecturer at the Flinders University, Australia, and Dr. Shihab Khan, a research fellow at Monash University, Australia. We extend our heartfelt thanks and gratitude to both of you, Dr. Pare and Dr. Khan. Thank you very much for accepting our invitation and joining us today. Before commencing with our main discussion, a quick note for the audience. Please listen carefully. This webinar is divided into two sessions. In the first session, Dr. Pare will deliver her talk that will be followed by a Q&A session. And then in the second session, Dr. Khan will deliver his talk followed by a separate question answer session. So each speaker will have individual question answer session in today's webinar. And during the speaker's lecture, please do not interrupt our speakers. Keep your microphone and camera turned off. For the question answer session, please write your questions up in the chat box. They will be addressed one by one. If you have further queries, if you feel like you need to talk to our speakers directly to clarify something, then click the raise hand button and we will allow you to interact directly with our speakers. The medium of our conduct for today's webinar will be English only. Now, I would like to introduce our first honorable speaker, Dr. Shvetal Pare. Dr. Shvetal Pare has done her PhD in English from the Australian National University. She currently works as a casual academic at Flinders University in South Australia. She did her MPhil and MA from Delhi University in India. She has published academic articles in journals such as Modern Asian Studies and translates articles from English to Gujarati for People's Archive of Rural India. Thank you so much, ma'am, for joining in. And so now I would like to request Dr. Pare to kindly begin with her talk.
Uh, Thank you for inviting me. And in fact, I have to begin with an apology, especially to Shia, because I was planning to be here for the whole session, but I discovered that my calculation was completely wrong. And I had calculated this as happening from 6 to 8, and I had told a friend I would catch up. And so now I might leave a little bit early, which is why we had to arrange it like this. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and see if I can do. Um, uh, can you see my screen?
No, it's not visible yet.
Okay, okay. I want to share my PowerPoint. So
Yes, it is visible now.
the PowerPoint.
Yes, yes.
Perfect. So this is my PowerPoint. The other thing I want to apologize for is that I am not a native Bengali speaker. I can follow a bit, but I can't speak at all. And so, which is why I will be talking mostly in English because my mother tongue is Gujarati. So I prepared this PowerPoint about studying in Australia. And to sort of guide or structure my presentation, I thought I would divide it as what should one study, where should one study, where should one apply, how does one apply, and then what sort of jobs can one get after studying. And I will try and give you as many details because in many ways I've been involved in the university sector in Australia for a long time. When I first came to Australia a long time ago, my husband was doing a PhD and I became a research assistant. And then I worked as a research assistant for about 3 years. And meanwhile, he finished his PhD and he became a lecturer. Then I took a break. I was on maternity leave. Then I started a PhD with a young child, which was not a good idea. I mean, I didn't think things through. So my PhD got delayed because, doing it with a young child was crazy. But I, in the meantime, my husband continued to be in the university sector, and he also teaches in a university. The subjects are completely different. He teaches marketing. I teach. My subjects are history and literature. I can teach sociology and critical theory. But yeah, so the streams are completely different, but the experience of the university sector is similar. So in what I'm sort of saying is it's even when I was not working in the university, all our conversations were only around what's happening in the university. And in his journey in the university, he's seen a lot because there have been like restructurings and changes. And also he's been part of like hiring committees, and also a lot of what he says also filters into my understanding of Australian universities. So, in terms of what should one study, one of the things that I wanted to say is that there are usually far more scholarships for science subjects than for humanities subjects. It's very hard to find scholarships for humanities subjects. I did a PhD in history and literature. I did have a scholarship, but I also had a solo authored article in an A-star journal, which is what got me the scholarship. And but that was also quite some time ago. Now universities, even if they want to give you funding, don't have as many options. And I'm going to click open this link and see if it is going to work for me. Okay, it's not letting me click. So I will send this and you can take a look at this link, but wait, let's try it this way. Can you all see?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, okay. So this is something called Find a PhD. And as you can see, this is like PhD programs, projects, and scholarships in Australia. And it has different, Shihab Monash is right there. It has PhD programs at different universities. So these are funded PhDs. What it usually means, funded PhDs, is that someone has a research project, they've got funding for it. And as part of that research project, they'll get one student to do a PhD who will do a lot of research around it, right? And that's how the PhD is funded. So if you see this, like the first one is medicine, nursing, health sciences, second one, medicine, Center for Coastal Biogeochemistry, Faculty of Science and Engineering. So if I were to do a search here, say art, so then in art, there's creative arts and design, there are two. Faculty of Arts and Education, there are three. So if, for example, we click creative arts, then architecture, construction of modernism in the global south, but it's in the School of Engineering and Built Environment, and tackling the Australian housing crisis. And similarly, if one is to do art and education, okay, how? Okay, this is only taking me to creative arts. So, but there was an education one as well. Yeah. So, education, if one is to do, then there is Deakin has platforms and political economy of digital childhood. So these sorts of PhDs are research-based PhDs, but the project is already defined. You don't get to define the project. The project is already defined, but most often such sort of PhDs are fully funded. And by fully funded, what I mean is there are two aspects to paying for a PhD. One is the fees for international students, and the second is your living expenses. So fees for PhDs are about, they range from 27,000 to 30,000 to 32,000 a year. So if you're doing a 3-year PhD, that's 90,000 over 3 years. And that too, the more extensions you take, the more the fees you have to pay. So $90,000 is crazy money. No one has that sort of money. So which is why it is best to get a funding. And if you get funding, then the funding will pay the university that $90,000, but it will also give you a stipend. And the stipend is not great. It's actually less than minimum wage, but it will allow you to so the income is there from the stipend and there is a funding. There is a better chance of getting a scholarship with a publication, but depends on which publication. Because I know now people in India get a lot of publications, but the ranking of the journal has to be in an Australian. What ranking is that journal in Australia? And again, I will share this link, but to just show you the website, there is in Australia a system of journal rankings, ABCD journal quality. And if you open it, it will be like a Excel sheet, and then publications, journals are ranked according to a variety of data and metrics. So if you have published in an A star or A journal, then you're more likely to get a scholarship. Now, there are, in most Australian universities, there are pathways to studying things that you have not studied before. So if you feel like, oh, I'm studying commerce or humanities and I don't want to shift to science, great, don't shift. But if you feel, oh, I was interested in this and I wanted to do it, but I couldn't do it earlier in life, then definitely look at a pathway, and there are pathways that get you towards studying things. Another way to get a PhD scholarship is to pay for and do a master's in Australia. Masters are also expensive. Same 30,000, but it's a 2-year degree, 60,000. And when you do the master's, you find a supervisor, right, during your master's. And once you find a supervisor, you can get funding for your PhD. So now in terms of what should one study, I do want to say if you're within the sciences, and I'm sure Shihab will talk much more about this, but from what I know, the options are very broad. There are a lot of opportunities that we may not be aware of. So even within sciences, there is just so much. Like I met someone last week who was doing a PhD in marine archaeology, right? And I was not even aware that this is a discipline. As in, I knew archaeology, but marine archaeology is a thing, and it's a big thing in Australia, and all sorts of students do it. And similarly, that any field that you take, there is so much more than you know within it. So if you've done a basic BSc degree, but like have some knowledge of life sciences, you can come here and study to be an optometrist or an ear. Uh, Again, I'm forgetting the official word, but I know from living here that there are a lot of jobs like that in very specific fields which require a basic science BSc and then a specialization. So now, if you are thinking of studying in Australia in order to become a resident here or become like a citizen here, move here permanently, then there is something called a skilled occupation list. And the skilled occupation list is a government list. And what it does is it sort of identifies what are the occupations in which there is a shortage. And depending, if you study those occupations, then you are more likely to get residency. So this is the skilled occupation list. And it's a huge list. It goes on. See, showing 20 out of 674 items. So there's 674 items on it. Not everything applies to all of us. Like some will be like for regional, special regions. So there'll be extra there. But generally speaking, so see, if you go down it, health worker, hospitality manager, accountant, right? So if you are feeling depressed that I haven't done sciences, you don't need to be. There is also accountant on it. So again, you can do a general search. Here there is a search. You can do a general search for an occupation and you can see if it is on the skilled occupation list or not. So one of the things that I will show you is that university lecturer and university tutor are both on the skilled occupation list. So if you're looking at this as a way of moving, so a lot of the occupations on the skilled occupation list are social work related, because right now that's a big gap within Australia. So I teach a course for uh, social work students. So what happens is, remember I told you about pathways. So there are students who want to do social work, but they do not have a background in humanities. They have studied commerce or management most often, or MBA or something, and they will come and often what they found was that they were often failing in social work because they didn't have a background in humanities. So the social work department at my university asked the humanities department if we could teach them an intensive before they do the social work degree. And that intensive is compulsory if you don't have a background. So I teach one of the subjects of that intensive. And there are all sorts of, like, I had 132 students this year, all sorts of students with all sorts of background from around the world. Lots of Indians, lots of people from China, Vietnam, Malaysia, Nepal. So huge cohort of students, and it seems next time the intake is even higher. And one of the reasons for that is because social work is a profession very clearly tied with um, staying on in Australia. So people in professions other than science do not need to be depressed. What you need to do is go to the skilled occupation list, see if there's anything that ties up with what you're doing. So now you will say, some of you may say, I have a PhD already, right? Why should I go to Australia to study more? I'm thinking of jobs in Australia. So I do want to say that usually Australian employers do not value the education of another country except US and UK unless it is in the sciences. Sciences, they need people. They don't have a lot of people. So they are, but again, this I'll leave for Shihab to talk more because he'll know much better than me. But usually, if you're from in any other subject, they value a degree from US and UK, they value degrees from other countries less. And so for other professions, it may be a good idea to do a master's or a PhD in a Australian university and then get a job in the field that you have studied. And one of the reasons I'm saying that is that my husband was once in a hiring committee and they were shortlisting people. And someone had applied, and this is Department of Business and Marketing, and someone had applied from IIM Ahmedabad, and they hadn't shortlisted. And the rest of the committee, no one had shortlisted. And he went to the committee and he was like, oh, this person's on my shortlist. And they were like, oh. And he said, this is like one of the premier management institutes of India. Why would you not shortlist someone? And they were like, oh, we didn't realize, we didn't know it was famous. So, their knowledge of spaces outside US and UK is very weak. Unfortunately, it's a sad thing, but that's how it is. So, which is why sometimes you might find, like, a lot of the people I know who work in universities here, I have also done degrees here, right? Very few that, like, again, I'll have Shihab talk more about this, because as far as I'm aware, his degree is not from here. So now here is the thing. If I'm telling you, oh, you should come here and study again, especially if you have already studied, you might feel that there is this risk, right? I have studied here, I have a degree. Why should I move and start from scratch? So there is always an element of risk in moving. Very few things can be guaranteed. Having said that, a lot of things work out by people being physically present here. So sometimes just being in the university can help set things in motion. A lot of things happen like on this, honestly, like the job I'm doing came about like that. I went to meet someone, we were having coffee, and because my background was history and literature, she was like, oh, I'm so sorry, we have no space in the history department, literature department. We are actually cutting down because we don't have funding for those subjects. And I said, no problem. And we were just talking, and I told her that, people are telling me that maybe look at school teaching jobs, but I'll miss teaching critical theory. And this person was like, can you teach critical theory? And I said, yes, I can, because a major portion of my PhD was critical theory. And she said, then I have a job for you to start in 2 weeks, because we are desperately looking for someone who can teach critical theory. So I think it was a learning moment for me also, because in my CV, it never occurred to me to highlight that I'm good at critical theory, right? I was still thinking in terms of disciplines, history, English. But when I talked to her, and then I realized, and so I'm now teaching in a sociology department. So it's one of those strange things. So what I'm trying to say, sometimes things work out by just being there. Where does one study? So this is something called Group of 8 Australia. Group of 8 are considered to be like the sandstone universities, the top universities of Australia. As you can see, geographically, UNSW and Sydney are in Sydney, Monash and Melbourne are in Melbourne, ANU is in Canberra, Adelaide is in Adelaide, where I live, Western Australia, and then Queensland. So they're sort of spread out a bit, but Victoria and New South Wales have 2 each. Now, there are advantages and disadvantages of the Group of 8 to the Group of 8. I personally studied or did my PhD at a Group of 8 university, but when it came to job hunting, I did not apply to the Group of 8 university in my city in Adelaide, because I also saw very closely how the better the university, the more the funding, the less the ability for people to, do things beyond the system. And the system can be very ruthless. So I had my fill of Group of 8. I do want to say, again, if you're planning to live in Australia long term, then if you study or work in rural Australia, you get 5 extra points in residency. Now, both Australian Capital Territory, where the ANU is located, where Canberra is, and South Australia are identified as rural. So if you come and work in one of these places or study in one of these places, you will get an extra 5 points. Even though South Australia is not rural, but to attract more people, it is classified as rural. I also feel this often smaller universities give more support and help to the individual than larger one. Though again, my experience is only of ANU, so Shihab might be able to tell you better about Monash, and maybe it's more supportive. Also, South Australia, Western Australia, Queensland, and Hobart as states are cheaper to live in than ACT. ACT, because it's the capital, is more expensive. Otherwise, it's quite small. New South Wales and Victoria. Again, if money is a factor, then this is something to keep in mind. But in most of these cities now, there are extensive Indian communities, Indian networks. You can find people to help you. Which finally brings me to the last part. I hope I'm doing fine for time. So the last part of my presentation, what sort of jobs can one get after studying? So this depends on a variety of factors. For a lot of jobs where will you go out of the university, having done well academically is an important factor. So I'll give you an example. I see this happen over and over again with Indian students, right? They take a loan, a bank loan, they come here, they are studying, but they are still like, because they are worried and they are still taking, like they're still taking money from home, and everything is expensive when you're converting to dollars and all. So a lot of them start working, right? You can work 20 hours a week. They start working officially 20 hours, more than that sometimes. And they start making money. And that feels good, right? Because they feel, oh, this money can cover my living expense. This money can pay for my next semester fees. So my loan amount is less. But then what happens? Some of them manage, but some of them fail in their courses. And if you fail your course, you have to do the semester all over again, and you end up paying the fees all over again. So I always tell my students, you will not make as much in money as you will lose in having to pay the university again. So I think I understand the pressure to work, but don't overwork. Don't work to the point where it affects your studies, especially like say social work or any field in education, and even in the sciences, any field in which you will go out of the university, the better your academic score, the better your chance of finding a job in the field. For jobs in the university, two things are important: publishing as well as forming networks. Now, I know there is this perception of networking, and some people hate it, some people are scared of it, some people. But I would say there are two types of networks. There are networks which are just to, like, form connections and take advantage of each other. And I stay away from such networks. I find them very shallow. But organically, what will happen, or what I have found happens, is that you will find people whose work is very similar to yours, whose ideas are similar to yours, who have a sense of the world that is similar to yours. And if they're older, they'll become your mentors. If they are your same age as you, they will become your friends and circle of people who you can bounce off ideas with. And if they're younger, sometimes you might end up becoming the mentor, right? So that sort of organic networks I'm a big fan of, right? Because I think I am always happy to help people, like talk to people about how to do these things. And similarly, because when I was new to the university, other people helped me, right? They told me, okay, do it like this, don't do like this. So I think those sort of networks are the best. Now, postdocs are again different in different fields. So postdoc is a whole different conversation. Again, there are more postdocs in science subjects than in humanities. Humanities, they're getting fewer and fewer. But one of the things that has happened in universities across Australia is there are increasingly two types of academic jobs. There are teaching specialists and balanced. Teaching specialists do more teaching. Most of their work is teaching. It's different in different universities. So, for example, I live in Adelaide. Flinders University, the workload division is, if you're a teaching specialist, 60% of your work is teaching, or 80% of your work is teaching, and 20% is admin. That's 100. But if you're in Adelaide Uni, 60% of your work is teaching, 20% is research, and 20% is admin. So even a teaching specialist, 20% of their work is research at Uni Adelaide. But if you're at Flinders and a teaching specialist, there is no requirement to publish at all. 80% of your work will be teaching. So the reason they're doing this, building more and more, is that they sort of sort the academics out. There are some who only teach and some who only do research, applying for fundings, getting publications, like that. Actually, I shouldn't say only do research. Most research jobs will involve some sort of teaching. Some teaching specialists only teach, as I said, some have a research component, but a smaller percentage of it. Now, when it first came, this sort of change started coming about 5 years ago, when there were a lot of restructuring, a lot of people lost their jobs. It was a very difficult time. When this change first came, most people did not want teaching specialist jobs because they thought it was less prestigious, and it wasn't seen as properly academic. But one of the things I've noticed over 5 years is teaching specialists and balanced positions get paid the same. The money is the same. I know a lot of teaching specialists who do other things, who do uh, they do podcasts, and they publish once in a while, but without any pressure, once a year or something. So like a lot of teaching specialists have much healthier work life balance. So in that sense, now more and more people are getting interested in being only a teaching specialist, having no pressure to publish. Now, can I get a direct job in an Australian university after doing a PhD in India? Again, this depends on the subject. It may be different in the sciences, but this is relatively rare in other disciplines. Indians do get these jobs, and it's people from South Asia get these jobs, but they usually have PhDs from Australia, UK, or America. Also, job advertisements in Australia are very competitive. Part of the reason is because UK actually does not pay lecturers a lot. And there is a prestige attached to a UK PhD. So people who are lecturers in UK will often apply for jobs in Australia because Australia pays lecturers better than UK, right? And America is very competitive. So people who can't make it in those competitive spaces are applying to Australia. The other thing is a lot of people in Europe apply to Australian universities because of the weather. They want to come here, they want to live here, they know lecturers here make good money. So it is quite competitive, and a lot of applications come from around the world. And that is why it's a bit more difficult. That is why a lot of the people, South Asian, who have jobs are people who did PhDs here, right? Or were here, actually physically here, and that's how they ended up getting the job. I thank you for listening. I hope I was not too depressive, and I'm looking forward to answering your questions. Now, I have to just figure out how to stop sharing this. Okay. Here.
Thank you very much, Dr. Pare, for this detailed and informative presentation. Your discussion was about fund opportunities for humanities students, talked about new and interesting subject choices and occupations, opportunities in social works for students from all sort of background, and interdisciplinary teaching opportunities. And I learned something new like rural Australia and opportunities in rural Australia. And obviously you have talked in detail about job opportunities and career options. I like how you seamlessly integrated your discussion about life in Australia throughout your presentation. It felt both lucid, practical, and understanding of what to expect and what not. So thank you very much for your lecture. Now it's time to open the floor for questions from our participants. If you have any questions for Dr. Pare, please feel free to type them in the chat box or use the raise hand button feature. We will do our best to address them. And one thing I would remind the audience that Dr. Pare will need to leave shortly for some unavoidable reasons. So if you have any...
Just one sec. I wanted to say, don't stress. I've looked at the time and we have about 45 minutes. So all good. I'll probably listen to a little bit of Shihab's presentation also before I go.
Okay, that's fine. So yeah, please write your questions in the chat box. So we already have one questions, ma'am. It is from Rana Mondal. He asked, I just completed my PhD in mathematics from Alia University. Can I get a postdoc position in Australia?
I think Shihab should answer this because I don't know as much about the sciences. So I think mathematics, very few people do PhDs here. But I think he should answer it. I will though say, however, I know at least 3 people who did PhD in mathematics and went to do jobs in government. Like they don't work in the university at all. So if you were an Australian citizen or a resident here, if you were here, there were a lot jobs in other fields, not just in the university. Shihab, do you want to answer that?
Thanks, Shvetal. I think it's a very difficult question to answer. Simply because, see, postdocs are advertised, postdocs are there, but it depends on your profile, your ability to network, and reach out to a potential supervisor. So a lot of different things. So if your question is related to that, okay, let's say I'm from Alia University, I'm not from a let's say IIT or some kind of a thing, would that be an impediment for you? I think not, because most of the postdoc recruitments happen based on profile. So if you have a good solid Q1 publications, that work will speak for itself.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Khan. So we have another question, and I think it is again for from science background. So should I ask you, ma'am, this question, or should I keep it for Dr. Khan's Q&A session? Let me read out the question, please.
Ah.
I have submitted my PhD in pharmacology, cancer pharmacology, and I have a cumulative IF of 35. What are my chances to get a postdoc in Australia?
I definitely think Shihab should answer this. I have no idea what cumulative IF is. So
Okay, ma'am.
Yeah, it's the impact factor. It's actually very hard to map because, see, it's not just about having good citations. Of course, that's a great thing if you have citations, but it's also about somebody needing your skill sets. That's very important. I think some of these things will be covered in the presentation as well. So maybe later.
All right. If you have any questions from humanities or social science related subjects, please ask them. We will take all the computer science and science related question in the question answer session of Dr. Khan.
uh, if that is okay, I see someone who's done a MSc in geography. So I would say to them that in Australia, please explore. There are a lot of very interesting courses, and especially because it's an MSc and not a MA in geography. Uh, Explore courses in sciences around geography, around mining, around geology, and you will find some good options. And you might, but again, it's the same thing. You might have to apply for a master's or a PhD, or because of your MSc in geography, you might start looking at jobs related to it directly and see how that goes. And as for computer science, I think computer science is one of those fields which is really tied with the skilled occupation list, the IT part of it. So if you want to come and do an postdoc, that's good. If you want to do it online, a lot of these courses are also offered online, but I'm not sure if they're offered online internationally. They're offered online within Australia. So can I get chance for PhD in Australia? Yes, you are the one who has a MSc in geography. Definitely, it's a MSc, so definitely look in science departments. Look in departments that talk about geology, that talk about earth sciences. Like do a search for earth sciences and see what comes up. Ayan, you're saying which university available in Australia for PhD without IELTS and application fees? I don't think there is any way to do a PhD without IELTS. That's a requirement. No matter which university, you will have to take the IELTS, and there will be application fees. The universities that we are talking about are all the big universities, like established universities. There are also a lot of smaller private universities whose advantage is that they are cheaper, right? But who are not as, like, for 2 years you can come here, you can be here, you can do a degree, and it's cheaper than a university degree. but then you might not end up working in that field at all, right? Then it's just a route to moving like that. Age eligibility or for PhD, I don't think there is an age eligibility for PhD, but the government keeps changing the regulation for who is allowed to stay after doing PhD. And that is where the age eligibility comes in. So you can come here, study, and they want your money. So they want you to come here and study. But for migration, they have cutoff ages that beyond this age, whatever degree you study, you have to go back. So, and these rules keep changing constantly. So again, that is something that an agent would be able to tell you best. Someone else is talking about recently receiving a PhD from IIT. So that I'll leave for Shihab to answer. Is it necessary having an honors degree along with master's degree for PhD admission? If you have a master's degree, then usually you can do a PhD. But some universities, especially if they're suspicious about your master's, they may say that you do an honors, which is a 1-year thing. So you do an honors and then we'll give you admission to PhD instead of accepting your master's. But that's really very, very department specific. And can you provide me with the website where I can search for postdoc position in India, Australia? I think Shihab has put LinkedIn. I would say, just as I find a PhD, you can look something like, if you Google postdoctoral jobs in Australia, then things should come up. There's Seek, of course. Someone else has done masters in nanotechnology in the University of Kashmir, wants to do a PhD abroad. Subir, I think getting admission is not a problem, right? Getting admission is like if you have good academic record, if you get a good IELTS score. Problem is not admission, problem are the fees. For most people, the fees are too high. Now, because your subject is nanotechnology, I think it is possible that you can find a scholarship or a funded PhD because it is, again, science, right? So how I think you should look for in that find a PhD link. I will send my presentation across. In the find a PhD link, you do a search for nanotechnology and see what comes up. Also, the university I'm at, Flinders, is apparently really well known for biotechnology. And a lot of people come here to study biotechnology. But again, I don't know much about it. I'm in a different department. Hi, Arifullah. See, when universities advertise for academic positions, Australian universities, they get applications from all around the world, US, UK, but also South Asia, Malaysia, India, Nepal, Pakistan, and there are a lot of people who have US, UK PhDs but are teaching in other parts of the world and things like that. So often, usually the people who make the shortlist are people who have a PhD in a relevant subject, right? Relevant to the ad. That is the first thing. Because a lot of people will have a completely different PhD and they'll send a letter saying, oh, we can teach this. But relevant to the ad, PhD, and a good CV. As Shihab also said, a good CV where you can demonstrate that you know the subject really well and you have published in it or you have been doing extraordinary teaching in it. That's what matters. Control engineering, again, I would let Shihab answer because I do not know as much. I'm thinking there would be a chance of getting a PhD, but again, I think when he does his presentation, it should cover it.
Okay. Anyone else? If you have please any question, please type in the chat box.
Sorry, I just realized I just went into my online teaching mode and started reading the chat messages and responding. Like I didn't wait for you to read them. Sorry.
No, it's okay. Actually, we upload our session on YouTube channel, so
Okay.
reading out the questions one by one for the YouTube viewers actually would be better.
Yes, I understand. I'm sorry. I just because in online teaching, that's how you do it, right? You just start.
Okay. Okay, I think we don't have much question for Dr. Pare for now. So thank you very much, Dr. Pare, for coming and sharing your valuable knowledge with our participants. We sincerely appreciate your contribution, and we believe that your talk will benefit our audience on their academic journey towards Australia. Thank you very much once again.
No,
So,
thank you for inviting me.
all right. So now, before starting our second session, please give us few moments